Welcome to the Explainer. You know, if you really think about it, global nuclear proliferation is essentially the most heavily policed, absolute highest stakes server on planet Earth. Today, we're going to look at the players who got banned, nerfed, or just voluntarily logged off right before hitting that ultimate unlock. Now, historically speaking, only 10 nations have successfully hit compile on a nuclear arsenal. But honestly, we're looking at a much more interesting group today. Okay, let's dive into this because there are 17 other nations stuck in what we're kind of calling the nuclear friend zone. These are the countries that tried, failed, or honestly have everything they need but are just sitting there waiting to hit the button. Let's look at the source code. Part 1. Dev blunders and loot drops. So, the early game of the nuclear arms race, back during World War II and the Cold War, was filled with catastrophic errors and, frankly, some absolutely insane shortcuts. Take Germany's uranium project, for example. They were pioneers, but they completely sabotaged their own build. I mean, look at the constant lack of funding and these absurd miscalculations. But the absolute biggest blunder? A completely self-inflicted brain drain. The regime actively expelled its top Jewish scientists, effectively driving the greatest minds of a generation straight into the arms of the Allies. And this brilliantly illustrates just how massive the gap became. The U.S. literally poured the modern equivalent of $35 billion into the Manhattan Project. Germany, a paltry $35 million. That is 1,000 times less. They didn't even stand a chance of completing the tech tree. But hey, while Germany failed through sheer incompetence, Spain got a miraculous loot drop. No, seriously, an actual loot drop. In the 1960s, Spain's dictator, Francisco Franco, desperately wanted the bomb. His scientists, though, were totally stuck on how to successfully produce plutonium. Then, out of nowhere, in 1966, a U.S. B-52 bomber collided with a refueling plane and literally dropped 4 hydrogen bombs right onto Spain. 2 of them partially exploded, leaking radiation and actual bomb fragments. So what does Spain do? Their scientists scoop up the pieces and reverse engineer them. I mean, they got the shortcut of a lifetime, completely skipping standard fission bombs and jumping straight into advanced thermonuclear designs. It's wild. So you're probably wondering, why isn't Spain a nuclear power today? Well, Spain eventually logged off. See, the United States found out about this little side quest and threatened to freeze their enriched uranium imports, which, by the way, would have totally crippled Spain's energy grid. Combine that massive threat with Franco's declining health and Spain's overall transition to a democracy, and the new socialist government finally just threw in the towel and signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1987. The ultimate cheat code, totally abandoned. Part 2. The virtual flex, threshold states. All right, this brings us to a terrifying modern reality where nations hold all the source code but actively refuse to assemble the hardware. We call these threshold states, or sometimes virtual nuclear weapon states. Basically, it means a country has completed all the groundwork and possesses the actual materials to quickly assemble a nuclear weapon, but deliberately stops just short of doing so. It is the ultimate diplomatic flex. You get all the deterrence of a nuclear threat without actually taking the penalty to your diplomatic standing. And honestly, no one flexes this better than Japan. Today, Japan is arguably the most capable threshold state on Earth. They literally hold enough plutonium to build thousands of warheads. And if they wanted to, they could build a fully functional bomb in less than a year. They're sitting entirely ready, just in case. But for right now, they're perfectly content remaining safely under the protection of the U.S. nuclear umbrella. But listen, that stance isn't totally unshakable. Obviously, following the horrifying devastation of World War II, Japan has been fiercely anti-nuclear. But regional threats, those change everything. Back in 1964, right after China tested its first nuke, the Japanese Prime Minister actually told U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson, if the Chinese communists had nuclear weapons, the Japanese should also have them. It goes to show that the environment really dictates the build. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how that exact same pressure is playing out right now in South Korea. Because of escalating, unpredictable actions from North Korea, a massive 76% of South Koreans polled in 2023 actually support creating their own nuclear arsenal. The desire to level up is huge when the player right next to you just keeps waving a rocket around. Part 3. The global sysadmin. Okay, so why hasn't South Korea actually built the bomb yet? Simple. Because of the global sysadmin. In the world's nuclear server, the United States acts as the ultimate administrator, constantly tracking IP addresses and forcefully banning players who try to level up without permission. And the US routinely shuts down the nuclear ambitions of its own allies, too. Taiwan, they were stopped just 1 to 2 years from completion, all thanks to a CIA informant. For South Korea, the US withheld crucial plutonium tech but offered their nuclear umbrella instead. And Yugoslavia was heavily monitored until they finally folded in 1987. Bottom line, the sysadmin is always watching. And hey, when diplomacy fails, the sysadmin gets aggressive. In this stunning display of cyber warfare, the US and Israel actually collaborated on Operation Olympic Games. They deployed a malicious cyberworm called Stuxnet that infected Iranian facilities and literally caused 20% of their nuclear centrifuges to physically burn themselves out. Think about that. They completely destroyed Iran's hardware without firing a single shot. A total game changer. But sometimes you can't just delete the files. Sometimes you literally have to smash the servers. We call these the kinetic admin bans. Israel actually bombed Iraq's Osirak reactor in 1981, and later on the Gulf War coalition wiped out what was left. Then in 2007, Israel flew entirely under the radar and completely destroyed a secret North Korean-linked reactor in Syria. The message here? If you try to quietly build a bomb, someone is going to drop one right on your facility. So the crucial point is, sheer intimidation is highly, highly effective. Just listen to this from U.S. President George W. Bush to Libya's Muammar Gaddafi back in 2001. He said, "Either you get rid of your weapons of mass destruction or we will personally destroy them and destroy everything with no discussion." Wow. And Gaddafi, who actually had an incredibly advanced black market nuclear program at the time, well, he looked at the U.S., looked at what had just happened to Iraq, and completely dismantled his program. Part 4. Resetting the server. So the sysadmin has clearly been working overtime, but we're looking at a real existential threat here, because so many nations are just hovering right at the finish line. Just look at the current roster of the Just in Case Club. Japan is capable in under a year. South Korea and Taiwan, maybe 1 to 2 years. Brazil in 3. Iran is considered extremely close. Germany and Spain, well, they have the tech, but currently remain inactive. But all these nations are sitting on the sidelines totally capable of assembling the hardware in a matter of months. And then you have the ultimate wild card, Saudi Arabia. Back in 2003, a leaked document revealed their 3 potential options. Option 1, develop their own bomb. Option 2, just buy a ready-made one off the shelf from another nation, like Pakistan. Or option 3, champion a nuclear weapons-free zone. And the Saudis have explicitly stated that if their rival, Iran, gets a bomb, they absolutely will too. When you really look at how volatile the modern geopolitical landscape is, you realize the dominoes are all perfectly lined up. Which leaves us with this final, rather terrifying thought. The sysadmin is holding the server together right now. They're patching the exploits, banning the rogue players, and sending out warnings. But the source code, it's out there. And dozens of nations know exactly how to compile it. So ask yourself, what happens when the sysadmin logs off?